All right, this week you guys are going to be taking portraits. Portraits is a very fun week because you really start to get an understanding of how light will impact an image, right? So I'm taking a portrait right now, and you can see this side of my face is heavily lit because I have myself a ring light on this side to try to cast a light on this side where this side is a little bit darker, and if I was to move straight up, I can see that sunlight coming through the window hitting me in the face. You want to pay attention to how light is impacting the portrait, right? Often, and it could be on purpose, right? Maybe you're trying to make one side of the face super dark, so it's kind of a moodier image. If the light was from above casting down, right, it would cast shadows below, creating more of a spookier feel, where a lot of times it's best if you can light it from all around, which is why people use a ring light, to try to cast light all the way around to create an even lighting and not have too harsh of a shadow on the face, right? If I was to move forward again, if you were to capture this image with the right ISO and shutter speed, this, if you exposed it so that it wasn't overexposed, this side of my face would be extremely dark. And that is something maybe you just want to try and do, right? Experiment with lighting. Experiment trying to have harsh lighting. Maybe you're going to turn all the lights off in a room, get a flashlight, and shine it only on one person's face, or shine it directly above or directly below, so that you can see how shadows are impacted when taking a portrait. But if you're trying to take the best part, even lighting is always the nicest. Other thing besides lighting that you're going to take into account this week is visual clutter, right? If you're taking a portrait, you want it pretty much to be an isolated background or a blurred background, which is why on your phone it has like portrait mode, so that it blurs the background, because you want it to be that you are isolating the person. And yes, for this week you can use an animal. If you can't find someone that would be willing to have you take their picture as a portrait and submit it, you can use your pet. Once again though, if you are using your pet, you're trying to minimize visual clutter, so don't have it so that they're just laying on their bed, maybe in front of the TV with all this stuff around them and you just captured your dog. You want it to be a fairly up-close image with minimal visual clutter, trying to capture a moment where your dog or your cat or your hamster or whatever animal you may have is kind of giving somewhat of a expression on their face. So this week also with portraits, so you're taking into account the lighting is the most important thing, trying to minimize visual clutter so that when you see the image, it is the portrait, which is the focal point, not anything in the background, just the portrait. Third thing, and this is if you do have a DSLR camera with a lens on it, right? When we talked about, and you were trying to do that, Canon explains everything where you were blurring the background. If you do have a camera with a lens, or your phone, if you put it in portrait mode, it'll blur the background digitally. If you have a lens and you use a low aperture, right, like a 2.8 or lower, it'll blur the background naturally. So if you do have a lens, you do have a DSLR camera, you're making sure your aperture number is not 5 and above, because that'll make sure everything's in focus. You want it like a 2.8 or lower, and this depends on the lenses you have. Some lenses don't go that low. But that will automatically blur the background. So when you focus on your subject, everything else, you get that bokeh look, that blurry look, and then you can, that's a quick way to isolate the actual person in your image, okay? So have fun with this week. Even submit your mishaps, right? So if you're doing some crazy lighting techniques and you're trying something new with lighting and you're like, wow, that didn't work. That's not a flattering portrait. Submit those anyways, because that's your learning process, right? You're trying to figure out how light impacts a portrait, right? And if I get even closer right into that direct sunlight is the worst situation to take a picture because of this, right? You get one side which is heavily lit, the other side which is super dark, not very flattering for a portrait. Overcast days, cloudy days, best case scenario, right? Because that cloud is acting like a massive light diffuser, and it's sending even light down on top of the subject, the person you're taking a picture of. So try not to do direct sunlight, right? Maybe move them in the shade. If you're going outside, move them in the shade underneath a tree or something like that, so it's getting shadow lighting rather than this, that harsh light on the side of the face, right? That's just and you can, this is one of these weeks where you're gonna take this principle throughout the rest of your life. When you're taking pictures of people, right? People say it's like, oh, it's a beautiful sunny day, let's go outside and take a picture. Don't take a picture though in direct sunlight. Try to find yourself a shady spot on a beautiful day where you get nice, even lighting across all the subjects, or else everybody, say you took a family portrait, every single side of one person's face would be super dark and the other side would be probably overexposed and the picture just wouldn't turn out great. Okay, so for this week, yes, you can use pets. I always get that as an email. I can't, people say they can't find someone that's willing to have their portrait taken. 100% you can use animals if you want. And it would be good, if you wanted to experiment, try doing both, right? Pet photography, whatever animal you may have, try to capture that image, and maybe try to capture a picture of a person where, they're trying to give somewhat of an expression. Could just be a pure smiling, but see if you can capture some kind of emotion in their face. Okay, have fun this week. It is a portrait week. Try to mess around with different lighting styles to see what is the best way to capture a portrait. Okay, guys, I'll see you next week.